everybody! Welcome to the Jayda InStitches show. One of life's little pleasures is curling up with a good book. But life is also busy, and we find ourselves pulled away from our books a little more frequently than we might like. In which case, you need a bookmark. And I don't just mean any little scrap of paper or shopping receipt that might be on the table next to you when you close your book up. It should be something pretty that welcomes you back to your place in that book when it's time to sit down and read again. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to make a pretty little placeholder, this little flowered bookmark. This is a real scrap project. You can pretty much use any yarn you've got, any hook you've got, and you can even dive into your beads and button collection and add a little bling to the center. It's also a really quick project, so you can make one up and then get back to that book. As an added bonus, today's tutorial has a free written pattern to go along with it. You can find our free patterns over on our website, and there's a link to our website in the description box. Or you can head to Google, type in Jayda InStitches in the search bar, look for our website, there it is there, click on the link, and that will take you to our home page. Then you want the pattern workshop, click on the pattern workshop page, and you can scroll through all of the free patterns we have. Newer patterns tend to be at the bottom, but there's a lot here, so take your time, take a scroll, and print off or save any of the patterns that appeal to you. Almost every single one of these patterns has a free tutorial to go along with it, and it's a great way to learn how to read a pattern. So let's grab our hooks, grab our yarn, we'll head on over to the craft table, and we'll stitch it up together. Our little flower bookmark is a real scrap project. You only need a few yards of yarn per flower. You can make it all one color like I've done here, or you can make it two colors like I've done here. I'm going to explain how you can make both as we go. I've used a cotton yarn for this particular flower. That was a size 4 cotton yarn. I used 2 acrylic size 4 yarns for this flower, and today I'm going to be using some leftover self-striping size 3 lightweight yarn. This is also like a DK. So you can really use any thickness of yarn, any kind of yarn. This is a real scrap project. I'm using a 4.5 millimeter hook. This is also known as a 7 in the US and the UK, but you can also use a bigger hook if you want a bigger flower, or a smaller hook if you want a smaller flower. You're going to want a button, so grab out your buttons and pick out some pretty buttons just to have a little something in the center of your flower. You're going to want a pair of scissors, a yarn needle, and a needle and thread to sew that button on. And really, once you've got all that together, we can get started. We're going to begin with a cinch circle. If you have trouble with a cinch circle, you can also substitute a chain 4 ring for this part of the flower. We're starting with the flower color, and we're starting in the very center. So once you have your cinch circle made or your chained ring, we're going to single crochet 6 stitches, so 6 single crochet stitches into your circle. Once you have 6 single crochet, you can cinch up your circle, and we're going to join with a slip stitch to that first single crochet we made. So it's always a small little stitch. You might have to kind of wiggle your hook to get it in there. There we go. I'm going to work over my short tail, but you can leave it out and weave it in later. So we're going to join with a slip stitch. There we go. And that's the very center of our little flower. Into the next stitch along our little ring, we're going to work a whole bunch of stitches into it. We're going to start with a single crochet, and then we're going to work 3 double crochet into the same stitch. So that's a single crochet and 3 double crochet all worked into the same stitch, and 1 more single crochet still into the same stitch. So it's a very busy little area, but that makes us a neat little petal. You're going to do the same thing into each of the next 5 stitches around. So I'm still working over my short tail. Here's the next stitch. I'm going to work single crochet, 3 double crochets, and a single crochet all into that same stitch. And that's 2 petals made. You're going to do the same thing into each of the next 4 now. Just ignore that little false stitch, but I'll catch up with you when we get there. Once you've finished your little 6 petals all the way around, you'll be confronted with this. This is the little false stitch here. You're going to ignore it. You're not slip stitching into it. You're not using it. And because there's so many stitches worked around our little flower center, your last petal will probably want to cover it anyway. We're all going to flip our flower over, and we're going to find a couple of loops anywhere on the back of our flower, somewhere close to the center. Just stick your hook under it, anything, doesn't matter what it is, and just slip stitch. And that's going to just close off our little petals. And if you're going to change color, you're going to snip your yarn with me now. If you're not changing color, you're going to slip stitch. So see the back of your first petal closest to wherever you sort of slip stitched last. You're just going to slip your hook underneath a couple of these loops here and slip stitch. That's if you are not changing colors. If you are changing colors, then you're just going to snip your yarn, fasten off. You don't have to worry about weaving in this tail just yet. You can take care of that later. And now you want to grab your other color. So this will be the color of your leaves and that little vine that we have. We're going to create a slip knot. All of you who haven't changed colors, you're still just doing a little holding pattern, waiting for us all to catch up here. And now we flip our flower over. And for those of you who aren't changing colors, you've already slip stitched into a couple of loops across the back of a petal, just 2. And for those of us who are changing colors, we're going to slip our hook under a couple of loops on the back of a petal and slip stitch to join our yarn. So now we have all slip stitched into a couple of loops on the back of a petal. So here we all move on together from here. We're going to chain 2, move to the next petal, find a couple of loops across the back, just slip your hook under a couple of loops. Doesn't matter which ones they are. It's usually the ones in the middle that are easiest to get at. And slip stitch. Chain 2, move to the next petal. Don't worry about your little short tail for now, we can work over it in a minute. So move to the next petal, that'll be this one here. Pick up a couple loops on the back of it, slip them over your hook, and slip stitch. Chain 2, move to the next petal, slip your hook under a couple of those loops, and slip stitch. You're going to do this a total of 6 times, but I'll catch up with you towards the little end. Once you've slip stitched and chained 2 out of the back of the last petal, that brings you back up to the beginning. So you should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 little chain 2 loops. You've chained 2 out of the back of your last petal, and now you're just going to slip stitch underneath the same 2 little loops that you either slip stitched when you weren't changing color or joined your new yarn to. So just slip stitch under there. And so what we've done now is created a little series of working loops underneath the back of our flower so that we can build our petals onto it. And here's where I said, you didn't have to worry about your little short tail. Now you can work over top of it because we're going to continue to work around as we build our petals, or I should say our leaves. So into the first little chain 2 loop, here it is here. These are built much like our petals. We're going to single crochet into that loop. There we go. And instead of 3, we're going to work 5 double crochet all into that chain 2 loop, but there's significantly more space there. So 5 double crochets all worked into the same little chain 2 loop. There we go. So that's a single crochet, 5 double crochets, and we're going to finish that little leaf off with a single crochet, all worked into the same chain 2 loop. There we go. And if you pull back, you see you've got a pretty little flower leaf now sitting underneath the petals of your flower up top. We're going to move to the next chain 2 space. It'll be underneath the next petal. Here it is. I'm still working over my little short tail. We begin with a single crochet, followed by 5 double crochets, all worked into that same little chain 2 space, or chain 2 loop. And after you've done 5 double crochet, you finish off that little leaf with a single crochet. So single crochet, 5 double crochet, single crochet, all into that same little chain 2 loop. You're going to do that for each of the remaining 4 chain 2 loops all the way around, and I'll catch up with you there. Once you've worked 6 little leaves all the way around the underside of your flower, and again, don't worry about the sort of fastened off tail of your flower, we'll take care of that later. You're going to find the first single crochet you made in the first leaf and just slip stitch to it. So that finishes off your 6 leaves underneath your 6 petals. Now we want to chain a little vine, so we're going to chain 36, so 36 chains out the bottom of our flower. Once you've chained 36, you should have something that looks like this. So here's your flower, minus the button, and 36 chains. Now we're going to work a pretty little leaf into the bottom of our chains. So it's built right into the chains. So you should have 36 chains. We're just going to focus on the bottom few for now. So we're going to skip over the first chain from the hook. We're going to slip stitch into the second chain from the hook. This starts our little leaf. We're going to single crochet into the next chain, half double crochet into the next chain, and into the next chain we're going to work some double crochet. So we're going to start with 3 double crochet into that chain. So that's 3 double crochet worked into that chain. And now we're just going to kind of twist our leaf a little bit so that you kind of have a grip on the bottom of it. And that little tail is sort of hanging out the bottom. And we're not done with this space. We're going to work 2 more double crochets into it. So 2 more double crochet into the same chain that those 3 double crochets were already worked into. So a total of 5 double crochet into that chain. And now we've kind of spun around and we're going to be working up the other 3 chains that we've already worked, but the underside of them. So if you pull it a little bit, there's the next one we're going to work into. We're going to half double crochet into the bottom of the other half double crochet. We're going to single crochet into the bottom of the other single crochet. And then we're going to slip stitch into the bottom of the other slip stitch. There we go. Chain 1. Now you've got a little leaf shape at the bottom of your vine, but it's kind of dangling. So we want to create a little sort of stem or almost like the sort of the veins you see in a leaf. We're going to work up the very middle of it and we're going to slip stitch. So if you pull your leaf apart, you'll see some little spaces that run right down the middle. That's where you were doing all of your crocheting. The first one is right underneath that little chain that we made, so we're going to put our hook right through it and slip stitch. So it's like a surface slip stitch. So your yarn stays out the back, your hook stays out the top. Go through the second hole or the second space, grab your yarn, slip stitch. There's the next one. grab your yarn, slip stitch. You can sort of pull up on that little point and you can start to see that there's that pretty little vein now that we're creating down the middle of our leaf. Here's the last hole down here. That's where all of our 5 double crochet will work. So we're going to slip stitch through there. And now we're going to find the middle of the top of that sort of middle double crochet. You're just going to slip your hook through it. And then you're going to take your flower and you're going to make sure that your chain hasn't twisted. So you're just going to sort of run your thumb down it. Make sure that you run your chain untwisted up until the bottom of your leaf. So you might have to twist your leaf a little bit. And you're just going to stick your hook through a chain that's somewhere near the top of your leaf. And we're going to slip stitch through that chain, back through the top of that stitch, and then through that little loop. And that secures our leaf to the bottom of our chain and keeps it from twisting. And that is it. Now you can sort of fasten off. Fasten off, pull that nice and tight. And now you want to grab your yarn needle and you just want to work that little tail in underneath some of the stitches across the back of your leaf. Don't go back and forth a couple times until it doesn't want to come out, and then you can trim any excess. Now you want to pick a button for the center of your flower, and to attach it you've got a couple of options. So you can use a button that has a little shank on the back, or you can use a button that has holes in the middle, you know, like a traditional button. If you've got a thin enough yarn like I do here and a needle with a large enough eye, you might be able to thread your leftover yarn tail through your needle and actually sew your button down to your flower using your leftover yarn tail, which is what I'm going to do. But if your needle doesn't want to pass through, sort of, you have to check it first, make sure it can pass through the shank or the 2 holes or 4 holes in the top of your button. If it doesn't, and it won't go through with the yarn because it's really, really small, or you need a much smaller eyed needle, then grab a needle and thread up the needle, and then you can just sew your button to the center of your flower like you would sew a button to anything. So you just sort of attach the yarn, or the thread I should say, at the back here, sew through it a couple times, and then knot off and weave in that little tail. And then you can weave in the tail of your flower. But if you're like me and you have a tail that is not too thick and a fairly large eyed needle, let's see if I can get this yarn through here. How dexterous am I today? Let's see. Aha! All right, it works. Great. So I'm just going to take that yarn, pass it through just sort of underneath where my little petals are and where my leaves are, and I'm going to bring the needle right through one of those little spaces. So you see these spaces? This will help me bring the yarn right through without splitting other yarn. I'm going to thread it right through the shank of my button. And then down through another hole on the other side, so right opposite. There. Yarn's pretty thick. If I can do it twice, I will, but if I can't, then I won't worry too much about it. So I'm trying not to split my yarn. I'm gonna go through the little thing, pull it tight, back down the other side. All right, I managed to do it twice. Great, so that's not going anywhere. So that's my little button secured to the center of my flower. And now, like I would a lot of other little things, you can just sort of create a little knot with your yarn. There we go. Nice and tight. And then, to save myself the trouble, I'm going to grab my regular yarn needle and I'm just going to weave that tail in back and forth underneath some of the stitches along the bottom of my flower. So first going one way and then hopping over a loop and going back through the same stitches but in the opposite direction. And I will go back and forth until this little tail disappears and I know that it won't want to come out. And there we go. So if you use a smaller hook and smaller yarn, you're going to get a smaller flower and bookmark. Use the same size hook with a slightly thicker yarn, you'll get a slightly bigger hook, or I should say a slightly bigger flower bookmark. And if you use a bigger hook and thicker yarn, you'll get, basically you just keep upsizing. So small hook, thin yarn, small bookmark. Bigger hook, thicker yarn, bigger bookmark. But the pattern works for both, and of course you can do it one solid color or two different colors, however you want. And then you can grab that book and get reading. And there you go, a sweet and simple little flowered bookmark, a nice little placeholder, just in case you need one when you get pulled away from that book. We hope you enjoyed making this along with us today, and if you haven't yet checked out our website, be sure to head over. We'll put the link in our description box down below. Check out all of the fun little things we've got over there on our website, including the pattern workshop page, where you'll find a copy of today's pattern. We'll see you guys soon here on the Jayda and Stitches show. Until then, stay safe, stay crafty, and have an awesome week. Bye, everybody.
Hi, everybody. Mr. InStitches here. Thank you for watching today. Here are some of our other videos you might be interested in. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe.